नमस्ते स्वामी जी।
हाँ, नमस्कार. So now we are going to start our class on Patanjali Yoga Sutra.
Swamiji,
Yeah, can you hear? Excuse
yeah,
me.
yeah, Raghu here. What was this song? It's very beautifully sung. What's the song?
Oh, it's the Nirvana Shatkam. Day before yesterday, we had Shankaracharya Jayanti.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hymn composed by Adi Shankaracharya. So we thought just as the time permitted, we thought why not we just chant as long as we were waiting for a few more to join. So just why we chanted. It's Nirvana Shatkam.
Nirvana.
YouTube, you may get
Thank you.
there are many such.
Very beautifully sung. Thank you.
Om Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidyakena Yopakarottam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjaliranatosmi. I prostrate with folded hands before Patanjali, who benefited mankind by delivering yoga for mind, grammar for speech, and by removing impurities of body through medicine. So in the last class, we were studying the 6th and the 7th sutra of the first chapter of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, where we find the discussion on the various types of vrittis have enunciated on the 6th. Now, as I found that this Yoga Sutra is quite analytical. So I took the pains to create some PowerPoint presentation. From today onwards, I will resort to that PowerPoint presentation. You can, of course, on this online class, you can, of course, just refer to that. And if you find that it's that you may need some more clarification by referring to it later on, all these classes are uploaded in the YouTube channel, for which the link has already been forwarded to you. You can go to that YouTube link and you can again just refer to all those PowerPoint presentation along with the talk, so that you can have a very clear understanding of the topics which has been discussed. And I am resorting to this because I find that it is quite analytical. If I just go on deliberating, sometime it may be quite confusing. So I thought, why not take the help of this PowerPoint presentation? So I will share the screen with all those PowerPoint presentation. So let us go to the 6th sutra. I think you can see the PowerPoint presentation. It's visible. So in the 6th sutra, if you just see that we studied that there are 5 types of vrittis. The vrittis means the mental modulations. As we told, as long as the mind is there, it is constantly having the thought waves or the mental modulations. These mental modulations are called vrittis. The 6th sutra, they enunciate the 5 different types of vrittis. They are the pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra, and smriti. So these are the 5 vrittis which has been enunciated in the 6th sutra, which we have studied in the last class. Let us have a very quick recapitulation. What is pramana? Pramana in English, we can translate it as true knowledge. Viparyaya is illusion, or this can be called the delusion. Vikalpa is verbal delusion. Nidra is deep sleep, Smriti, memory. Now, let us try to understand that what's the distinction between these 5 types of vrittis. As in the last class, we have already discussed this pramana, the first one. So as we told that the vrittis are the thought waves. Now, whenever we are perceiving anything, the content of the thought wave, which is reflected in the thought wave, is called pratyaya. Pratyaya is the knowledge that comes from the vrittis. So pratyayas is the knowledge which comes from the vrittis. So here we find that pramana, when the pratyaya of the vritti conforms to the perceived object. What it means, suppose I'm seeing a red flower. In my thought waves, the mind is constantly breaking into the waves. Each of the thought waves, each of those chitta vritti is reflecting the flower. So it is giving me the exact knowledge of the thing which I am seeing. So there's pratyaya and the vritti conforms. This pratyaya of the vritti conforms to the perceived object, that is pramana. What is viparyaya? When the pratyaya of the vritti does not conform to the perceived object. You may say, that as an example, the common example in Vedanta, in yoga, a rope is lying in the twilight hours, in the dusk, and because of lack of proper light, I see it as a snake. So what is happening? Outside there is a snake, there's a rope. But the pratyaya, the content of the thought waves is a snake. So what is happening? The content, the pratyaya of the vritti is not conforming to the perceived object. So that is the delusion. We find it happens in our life. So that is called viparyaya. This type of illusion where the pratyaya of the vritti does not conform to the perceived object, that is viparyaya. What is vikalpa? Vikalpa is when pratyaya of vritti does not have corresponding object of perception. To give an example, suppose I say Shashasringa in Sanskrit, they give that example, that the horns of rabbit. Now, with your mind, you can imagine. In the world of virtual reality, there you will find the children are constantly watching that so many animated pictures, where so many imaginary characters are there. So I can imagine all those things, a rabbit with horns. But in our day-to-day life, for practical purpose, we can never see a rabbit with horns. It is just a pure imagination which has no reality as such, corresponding reality. So what is happening? When I say that word, Shashasringa, immediately the pratyaya, there is a pratyaya. The thought waves has reflected something, but which has no corresponding object of perception. In the outside world, there is no such corresponding object of perception. That is called vikalpa. This word vikalpa actually means virtual reality. We will come to the discussion later. It's something which actually has resulted in the evolution. The entire human evolution is because of vikalpa. It has saved mankind from many perils, from many dangers. How we have used that, when we come to the discussion, we will just indicate that. The vikalpa means something which is not real, is virtual. It's an imagination. And the pratyaya of that vritti does not correspond to any object, any real object in the external world. Nidra, where the vritti does not have any pratyaya. So it is very interesting. The mind, the thought waves have not stopped. It is still there. But the contents, there is no content. It is empty. The pratyaya is empty. So you will find all the 5 distinctions of the vrittis is as per the pratyaya is concerned, the content of the wave. As per the content, these are the 5 types. The last is smriti. So when pratyaya of the vritti arise from the latent impressions, that is the samskaras of any of the above 4 types of vrittis. That I have seen the red flower, it never gets lost. It goes in my memory. It stays there. And any time it can come back. The sanskara which is stored in my chitta can come back as memory. And that memory is smriti. So the pramana can come back as memory. that I was deluded by seeing a snake in a rope or seeing a huge reservoir while passing through the desert. The mirage I have seen. The desert was the substratum in which the illusion of the huge reservoir in the form of the mirage, that also is a vipariyaya. So those all, I can remember that yes, that's some few years back, I was passing through the desert. I had the delusion of the mirage in the form of delusion I have experienced. So that is vipariyaya. I can remember that. So there is a smriti of vipariyaya, smriti of pramana. There is a smriti of vikalpa, that all the virtual realities which has no corresponding object in the external world, it is a mere imagination, that also I can remember. All those imaginations can be stored as the sanskara, which can again come back as memory. And the nidra, of course, when we have a nice deep sleep, we never forget. When we come back from that state, we remember that we had a very nice sleep. So the smriti is the memory of all the other 4 types of vrittis. So when the content of your wave is in the form of memory, then the pratyaya is in the form of memory, that vritti is called smriti. So these are the 6 types of vrittis which we have discussed in the last class. Let us go to the 7th. Now, one by one, each of those these vrittis will be further elaborated. In the 7th sutra, the pramana, the right knowledge, the true knowledge, again has been described as of 3 types: pratyaksha, anumana, and agama. These are the 3 types of pramana, true knowledge. So how to this distinguish, we have already discussed in the last class. So now today, just to have the exact idea that what's the distinction between pratyaksha, anumana, and agama, we will first resort to the explanation of 2 more terms, that is samanya jnana and vishesha jnana. So you will find that all these this transcription in English, wherever the main confusion happens with the A may be A may be A. The other pronunciation is very subtle difference is there. I have not distinguished, but here you will just for the first time I'm indicating wherever the A is pronounced as A, it is written in capital letter, and wherever the A is pronounced as A, it is the A is in just small letter. It's not the capital letter. So here you will find the samanya, and vishesha. These are the 2 types of jnana. What are that? Samanya jnana means general, just an overall knowledge. Now, when I say, to give an example, that the mango is sweet and it has a nice flavor, even the one who has not tasted mango, just by hearing the word, can have a general idea of the mango, because he or she has tasted so many sweet things, has smelled so many fragrant things, so have the idea of the good smell, of sweets taste as an idea. So I can have a general idea of the taste of the mango. But that knowledge is just samanya, is general. You can never have the real knowledge unless you have tasted the mango. Once you have tasted the mango, then what that sweetness of the mango means, you will realize. What that flavor actually means, that will realize. So this, after you taste, the knowledge which you have, that is a vishesha jnana. So what is pratyaksha? When I am just seeing a thing. Then the samanya, when I am perceiving a thing, it is not only seeing, whether I am seeing or hearing or smelling or tasting or touching. Then what happens, if it's a true knowledge, if I am not deceived, then the samanya and the vishesha jnana both simultaneously happen in the present moment. When I'm tasting the mango, yes, I know that what that exact sweetness is, what that flavor is. So samanya and the vishesha jnana is in the present moment for pratyaksha. What is anumana? Pratyaksha means this perception, perceptual knowledge. Anumana, inferential knowledge, inference. What's the inferential knowledge? Very nicely it can be distinguished. Previously, I have tasted the mango. I know that I have the memory of the Vishesha Jnana. What's the exact smell of mango like? What's the exact sweetness of mango like? That I have the knowledge already in the past. Now, when someone comes and just tells me the mango is not there, just tells me that mango is sweet, it has a nice flavor. So when he's saying, it is just the Samanya Jnana. But as I have already the memory of that particular taste and smell in the past, I can immediately relate to those words and can have the exact true knowledge. So what is Anumana, what is inference? Whenever the Vishesha Jnana has been experienced in the past, in the present, only the Samanya Jnana experience. And by that, I can have the true knowledge. Then it is inference, it is Anumana. So there are so many other examples that whenever there is a fire, there is smoke. The smoke is the Samanya Jnana. The fire itself is the Vishesha Jnana. Previously, most probably, I have seen the fire along with the smoke. Now, whenever there's a bush fire, we don't see the fire. In a far off distance, the bush fire has happened. And we see in the sky is full of smoke. We are not seeing the fire. The Vishesha Jnana is not there. Only the Samanya Jnana, the smoke is there. But as we have experienced previously that wherever there is fire, there is smoke. Now just by seeing the smoke in the sky, I can immediately infer, Anumana, what? That there is a huge forest fire, bush fire. So Vishesha Jnana was in the past. I previously experienced that the fire is always associated with smoke. Now I am not seeing the fire. Vishesha Jnana is not there. But because of my previous Vishesha Jnana, the Samanya Jnana in the form of smoke, whenever it is there, immediately I can infer, and it is a correct knowledge. So that is inference, that is Anumana. And what is Agama? This is very important. In school, when the teacher is teaching the small children about the Newton's law, about the various electromagnetic laws, and the teacher, he or she tells the theory, the exact theory, the principle, the electromagnetic principle, and the gravitation, the laws of gravitation. And the student, after that, asks, what's the proof? The teacher says, now in this level of your class, in this standard, as per your level of understanding is concerned, now it is very difficult to explain you, to prove you these principles. When you grow up, when you gather a bit more knowledge, then you can understand. Now you have to take it as a working principle. And the student believes on those words, continues with his study. For him, all those theorems, the working principles are the Samanya Jnana. But as he or she progresses in his study, in future, when he has sufficient knowledge to really understand the proof of it, the equation, derivation of it, then he or she will have the Vishesha Jnana in the future. So that also is perceptual, direct knowledge, pramana, correct knowledge, for which the Samanya Jnana is in the present. In future, the Vishesha Jnana will happen. Now, we have already mentioned that all these 5 types of vrittis can be both klishta, means afflictive as well as non-afflictive. So here in pramana, only this agama actually speaks of non-afflictive pramana. How? That in our day-to-day life, with the present sensual our perception in the world, sometimes we find that we have been stuck to the corner. We find no solution. There are so many afflictions. We are as if at the end of a precipice. We don't know how to proceed. And then the scripture comes to say us about another dimension of our existence, which is not perceptible now. We have to have faith. We have just the way in the school, we have the faith in the words of the teachers, faith in the textbook, which the teacher has already studied, and he is the thing who represents that textbook. Similarly, a realized soul is the one who is a representative of the scriptures. The realized truth mentioned there has been realized by the scriptural, this preceptor, the spiritual teacher. He has experienced it in his life. He or she has experienced, and now he or she is instructing the humanity about that knowledge. The same way we have the academic knowledge here also, first we have to have faith that all the words which has been spoken in the scripture is the samanya jnana for me. I do not have the corresponding exact perception, the vishesha jnana. But if I follow the modes of practice as has been enunciated by the scriptures, by my spiritual preceptor, by the guru, at last it will result in pratyaksha. The truth will be something palpable. As in the words of Shankaracharya, the ultimate truth is not a matter of mere intellectualization. It is something as palpable, as perceptible as a fruit in your hand. Karatala amalakavat, that's the word Shankaracharya uses. So when the truth becomes your realization, it becomes a vishesha jnana in future, then the samanya jnana, leading to the vishesha jnana, that is the agama. That is also a proof of the this true knowledge. So thus these three types of pramana has been described in the 7th sutra. 1 minute, sorry. So this is what we discussed in the previous class. Now we will go to the 8th sutra, which we just mentioned that this is the class in which we will discuss the viparyaya, that is indiscrimination or the illusion. So what is, let us just first go to the sutra. What is viparyaya? Viparyaya mithya jnanam atat rupa pratishtham. So what is viparyaya? Is mithya jnanam. It is false knowledge. Mithya jnana means false knowledge. And why it is false knowledge? Because it is atat rupa pratishtham. It is not established in real nature. Tat rupa means the exact knowledge of the thing. Tat means the negation of that. So when my knowledge is not established in the real nature, the thing which I am perceiving is, because of indiscrimination, because of illusion, is perceived as something else, then it is called viparyaya. In the last class we have mentioned that the word viparyaya literally means something destruction. Viparyaya means destruction. It means some accident. Then why viparyaya is called accident? Why, in what sense indiscrimination is accident? So when I see a snake in a rope, it may not be in any way a destruction for me. But viparyaya in the spiritual sense is constantly happening. What's that discrimination viparyaya is happening? That this psychophysical existence, which gives us the sense of ego, asmita, that I am this body-mind complex, this individual self, this individuality is a viparyaya, is a false knowledge. And that is the cause of our transmigration, birth after this life after life. That all our suffering entails from that. So that's why this indiscrimination has been termed as viparyaya. So this, you will find in the Yoga Sutra, the terms are very significant. Though the literal meaning may mean something, it may mean something, they are used to indicate the signified meaning. So viparyaya, though literally means something destruction, viparyaya means destruction, but it is used to explain indiscrimination or illusion. So the notion of the individual self is the greatest viparyaya. Now, what is the individual self? Now we will enter into the discussion that why all the vrittis, because of our sense of individuality, which emanates from that, is resulting in all our suffering. Now, first, let us try to understand what that individual self means. That whenever I speak of my individuality, there are two words spoken of in the scriptures, in Vedanta as well as in yoga. What that individuality means? The one who is the karta, the doer, and bhokta, the enjoyer. Whatever actions I do, I have the feeling. It is I who am the decision maker. I decide to do certain thing. I have the choice. I decide whether to do or not to do, or to do in some other way. I may do, I may not do, or I may do in some other way. Kartum, akartum, anyatha kartum. This choice is mine. So I am the doer. But after doing anything, I accrue the result for my actions. So I am the doer as well as I am the enjoyer. So with a sense of individuality, these two notions come. This doer and the enjoyer, that I am the karta and I am the bhokta. Now today, we will, even with the help of modern psychology, we will try to find out that this both, the notions of karta and bhokta, the doer and the enjoyer, is an illusion. I am neither the doer nor the enjoyer. Apparently, it may feel that we are speaking something very queer, but we can just be sure about the fact that when we resort to the present study of the psychology and neurology, with the help of the present modern day psychology and neurology, we can really be as certain of the fact that I am neither the doer nor the enjoyer. And as a result, if I'm neither the doer nor the enjoyer, the sense of individuality, this individual self, actually is dependent on these two. If these two proves to be an illusion, then this individual self also will prove to be an illusion. So this idea of individuality is a big illusion with which we are going from life to life. That is the vipariyaya. So let us try to first understand. Just 1 minute, few people are waiting. So now, notion of the, the notion of bhokta. But let us first go to that, whether I am the enjoyer or not. You know, this Buddhism is an offshoot of Hinduism. And there are some, the ideas of Buddhism are wonderful. To let you know, the next Thursday, we won't have this Yoga Sutra class. Instead of that, we will be having a small celebration. It will be online on Buddha Jayanti, because the next Thursday is the Buddha Jayanti. And there we will have a discussion along with some chantings and some bhajans. We will have a discussion on Buddha and his philosophy. There we will also elaborate the ideas which we are going to describe today. It is so similar to Hinduism. Now in Buddhism, one thing is very interesting. Buddha was the most rational man in the human history. You won't find a more person with a common sense like Buddha. All the religion starts with God. And the God is something which is beyond my perception. I have to believe. What Buddha did is something very interesting. He never talked about God. He was totally silent about it. He started with the thing which we all realize. We don't have to imagine anything. What is that? That is the first noble truth of Buddhism that Buddha speaks of, that there is dukkha. Now, with the word dukkha, most of the time we translate it as suffering. It's not the correct translation. Dukkha doesn't mean suffering. Dukkha's real meaning is dissatisfaction. Now you may say, both are same. Suffering and dissatisfaction means same. But there is a subtle difference between suffering and dissatisfaction. Let us try to understand with the help of an example. Suppose I like cheesecake. So when I'm eating the cheesecake, I'm of course not suffering, I am enjoying it. But am I satisfied? Because when I'm eating the cheesecake, most probably I have already developed the craving for the second. And that's dissatisfaction. So though I'm I'm enjoying, but that doesn't mean I'm satisfied. So this is the thing which is being indicated by the word dukkha. Dukkha means dissatisfaction. And it is true for all our sensual pleasures. That even when we are enjoying, most probably we are really enjoying, we are not suffering. Of course we are not suffering. But are we satisfied? No. That's the big thing which Buddha has told. In our life, we find that is terrible dissatisfaction. That's the first noble truth. You will find that Buddha is a real rational person. He has started with such a thing which we all realize in this life. Why we are discussing this? Let us go to the second noble truth. In Buddhism, the second noble truth is the cause of dukkha. That is called tanha. Tanha means clinging or craving for the things that doesn't last. For the time being, it is giving me pleasure, but the very next moment, it evaporates. What I am feeling will fade, and I will crave for more and more and more. So this is tanha. So this in the modern day psychology, they use the term hedonistic treadmill. All our sensual enjoyment is something like riding on a hedonistic treadmill. What it means? The word hedonistic means hellish, something of the hell. And treadmill, you all know. The thing you use for your exercise, where you run, you're running, but you're running in the same place. You don't move forward. So it is a hellish treadmill. All these cravings ultimately don't give us any satisfaction. We are constantly craving, but we are not satisfied. Ever, in the words of Swami Vivekananda, ever running, never reaching, nor a distant glimpse of shore. That's what all our sensual pleasures are. Life after life, we thinking that we decide to enjoy the world, we at last, with all our effort, get the thing which I really crave for, and then I find I'm dissatisfied. Now, is this the way to really get happiness? Or is it a way whereby the nature is befooling me? Now let us try to understand the nature of it, why it happens, why it is so. Now in Vedanta, in yoga, they speak of three ashanas, three types of desires. Ashana means desire. All our desires in life, at last, can be boiled down to just three types of ashanas. You just melt down all your ashanas, the varieties of desires. At last, can be boiled down to just three types. What are they? Putraishana, the desire for progeny. Vittaishana, desire for wealth. And Yashaishana, desire for name and fame. So, these three ashanas, desire, I think I desire. But easily it can be proven with the biological evidence, with the neurological evidence. It can be proven that actually it is not I who desire. All those desires are the tools of the nature. The nature, the Prakriti, has designed them in such a way that once the desire is fulfilled, I get happiness, but it doesn't last. Why it happens? There's a way by which the nature is sustained. The nature uses those fulfillment of the ashana as a tool to make us do certain thing by which it will be sustained. In no way it is going to give us happiness. Now let us go to the biological evidence to prove it by studying the nature of sense pleasure. Very interesting. They say the dopamine. The dopamine is the chemical, is a pleasure chemical. When you are just having some aim for some enjoyment, you have some goal, certain goal for your sense pleasure. The moment you attain it, any creature, what happens? We get tremendous happiness. There's a maximum secretion of this dopamine. So the moment what is the sense pleasure? The moment the pleasure is delivered, when any creature reaches the important goal, whether it is putraishana, the desire for progeny, or desire for wealth, or desire for name and fame. So immediately this creature gets a tremendous happiness. The second thing, immediately that pleasure doesn't stay. That pleasure evaporates shortly thereafter. Just if you find the nature of any of our sense pleasures, whether it is vittaishana, whether it is putraishana or yashaishana, whatever may be the desire, when we meet it, we are in ecstasy, but after that, everything becomes monotonous. The thrill goes, the pleasure evaporates. The third, we always remember, whenever again we are in pursuit of any pleasure, we will find that we always remember the peak of the pleasure. We forget the evaporation. It makes the creature focus more on pleasure that is to come than on its ensuing evaporation. There's a third. That we all will agree. These are the nature of all the sensual enjoyment. The fourth is very important. Anticipation gives more pleasure than the real pleasure. From the morning, we are planning something just to go out in the evening to have some family gathering and some dinner together. In the morning, we find it is giving us so much of enthusiasm. We are full of enthusiasm. By the time we are already enjoying it, by the time we are enjoying, we will find that the way we anticipated, it is almost flat now. We don't really have the thrill which we had in anticipation than when we are really enjoying it. And the last is, if anticipation is not followed by fulfillment, the creature feels pitiable. There's something like depression. Now, this all we will agree. Now let us try to find out what's happening. We think I am enjoying, but if you study the nature of the enjoyment, you will find actually it is not I who am enjoying. All the joys are the tools of the nature to make us do certain thing by which it is sustained. Now let us try to understand how it happens. You will see all the three, putraishana, vittaishana and yashaishana, is linked with the propagation of genes by which the nature, the prakriti is sustained. Putraishana, we need not have to explain. We know that it is a progeny. Through the progeny, the genes will be transmitted and the nature will continue to exist. Vittaishana. Vittaishana is also, unless I have wealth, unless I have my means of sustenance, I cannot think of putra, progeny. First I have to sustain myself, then only I can think of progeny. So vittaishana also is linked with putraishana. I sustain myself, then only I can think of progeny. Yashaisana, this also is linked with the continuation of nature, of propagation of genes. You may say, how? The desire for name and fame? Yes. Throughout this animal kingdom, you will find what? Just say any animal. The lion, the male lion, it has its own territory. It won't allow any other male lion to enter that. Why? It knows the more it has power, the strength, the more it can have its own territory where no one else is allowed, the more it can show its power, the more it has the chance to propagate its genes. So now you will find the same thing is working even in the human being. That from a small child is being educated, having education and then going for some work, earning money, and all those is actually indirectly giving him the name and fame. For what? All those things increases his profile, his value, so that he or she can have a good match through whom again the progeny, that they can continue to have better progeny. So you will find all the three is actually linked with the propagation of nature. And that's why nature gives us happiness, so that we are motivated to do that. Nature in no way has the intention to really give us happiness. It uses it as a tool. We think we are the bhokta. We are not the bhokta. Now you find, after understanding these three ashanas, now you will understand that when I just meet the goal, whether it is putreshana, vitteshana, or yashishana, there's an ecstasy. But it never stays. It immediately evaporates. The second thing, why it evaporates? Suppose you're enjoying the delicacy. When you're enjoying a delicacy, cheesecake, and that enjoyment, if it lasts forever, that satiation is there forever, you will never go for the second meal, and you will starve and die. So now you understand that why nature has used the happiness as a tool, has made it such a way the dopamine secretion is bound to evaporate. So that's why it evaporates shortly. But very interesting, our memory is very much filtered. Whenever we again pursue for the happiness, you will find a very interesting thing. We always remember the ecstasy. We forget that evaporation. That's why you will find all the past is always good. If I ask you, how was your childhood? All will say, oh, it's a golden memory. The memories are always golden. You know why? Because that's the way our brain makes us to, in the future, do things which in the past, when I was doing, I had many bad experiences, but they are filtered off. They're not in the memory. Only the good things are there. In the childhood, we had our own struggle. We had our own sense of deprivations, but we generally forget that. Only the good thing remains in the mind. Why? That's the way the nature has devised. It always gives what you say, that we always focus more on the pleasure. The thing, that evaporation, we always forget. You'll find in this life constantly it happens. All the crime happens because of that. All the crime, that they think only the fulfillment, that all the things that is going to fulfill his desire. He or she never, when he's committing a crime, never actually thinks that the things which is actually going to hamper, is going to deter in his pursuit for happiness. So why? The nature has again built us that way. We always, because otherwise we won't get motivated. If we always know the negative side of it, it is in our mind, we won't get motivated. So it always shows us the golden side of it, not the negative. We forget about it. So that's the way to motivate us. We will find this third thing, that the creatures focus more on pleasure that is to come than on its ensuing evaporation. So it is a plan of the nature to motivate us to do that. The fourth is again important. Anticipation gives us more pleasure than the real pleasure. Why? Again, the same thing. When you are anticipating, when you are planning, once you have planned, you're already motivated. You are going to do. Now the nature knows that you have already been motivated. You are now going to act on it. So what's the use of giving any more pleasure? Because you've already been motivated. Once you anticipate, the thrill is given at that time. When you are in the enjoyment, you find it has already become bland. Why? Because the nature's work is done. It has already motivated you to do the thing. So that's why always more happiness is in anticipation than in the real pleasure. And the last speaks of the dvesha and avinivesha. That when anticipation is not followed by fulfillment, the creature feels pitiable. The example, suppose our ancestors who were the forest dwellers. For the first time, they are moving out in venture of fruits as their food or roots, whatever it may be. And they see a tree full of ripened fruits. They climb up, pluck a fruit, they find it's very delicious. The next day, again when they are passing through a forest, then again they see another tree which is laden with ripe fruits. He climbs up, tastes it, and finds it to be extremely bitter. Now this condition he feels pitiable. What has happened? In the nature, everything is not there to sustain me. I may anticipate wrongly that it is going to give me pleasure, is going to nourish me, but it may be the contrary. So to desist me from the things which is not favorable for my existence, the nature, what it does, instead of giving giving the peak of dopamine secretion, it just depletes it. Just the opposite. It just depletes, and that makes me feel pitiable. That makes me feel depressed. So now you will understand this happiness, the sensation of this happiness when the pleasure is fulfilled, the sense pleasure is obtained, and even the sense of the depression, this pitiable feeling when my desire is not fulfilled. Everything is actually the tool of the nature. It's not that I am enjoying. I am not the bhokta. The nature is using all the sensual pleasure, the happiness from the sensual pleasure, all the experience of happiness from the sensual pleasure, this bhoga, as a tool to make me do, by which it will be sustained. So now, just by studying the nature of your these sensual pleasures, can you really say you are the bhokta? That's a big question. You can find out. So now that our individuality is dependent on two things, karta and bhokta. So we find that the bhokta is already in big question. Now the next is karta. Let us go to the next. That what is the karta? Whether I'm karta? So in the previous thing we find that I'm not the bhakta. Why? Prakriti does not allow us to see the reality. I constantly am deluded. I think I am going to enjoy, but actually what the Prakriti is doing, it's just using happiness as a tool to sustain itself. Prakriti does not allow us to see the reality. Prakriti does not aim to make us happy. Happiness is merely a tool of nature for its own sustenance. So now we can understand that I am not the bhokta. Even with the help of the modern neurology, you can understand that with the dopamine secretion, with the nature of the dopamine secretion, you can understand that you are not the bhokta. There's all the happiness, which I think is the result of my action, is actually the tool of the nature to sustain itself. It is using the happiness and is forcing me to do certain things, which I thought I am doing. Now the question is, am I the karta? Am I the doer? Very interesting thing. There are very, very interesting experiments which will show that you are not the karta. In a kind of spooky experiment, scientists at Max Planck Institute reveal that our decisions are made 7 seconds before we consciously decide. Very interesting. It's a very, very well-known experiment. The experiment is very simple. There is a switch which you can press either with your right hand or with your left hand. It's your option. The moment you press the switch, the time at which you pressed is noted in a display board. So the experiment has been done with many people. What you have to do? You just sit, and the moment you decide that I will press the switch with my left hand, press it, and the time will be displayed. You have the idea that the moment I decided, I have pressed the switch, and the time is recorded in the display board. But very interesting, all the person's brain had a eFMRI scanning machine fixed to find out when the decision was really taken. Very interestingly, as an average, it has been found that though each and every individual felt the moment he decided, he has pressed the switch either by the left hand or with the left hand. That I have decided I will press with the left hand, immediately I press with the left hand. I have decided I will press with the right hand, immediately I press with the right hand. And what the time is displayed is the thing, is the time at when I have decided. That's the general notion for each and every individual. But very interesting, it's a very famous experiment of the Max Planck Institute. In an average, it has been found that when the switch was pressed and I thought I have taken the decision to press either by the right hand or with the left hand, the scanning showed the decision was taken at least 7 seconds early. So it's a very spooky, it's something like ghost, as if some ghost is there sitting in my brain and just directing me to do the thing which I am going to do. That who is am I the one who is the Karta? A big question comes. So here, this kind of experiment has been explained is spooky. So at the very beginning, the question comes, am I the Karta or not? So now why it happens? For about a decade, it was thought that this is really something spooky. But now the reason has been found out. There is another famous experiment called split brain experiment, which explains why it happens. So now, it's very interesting. This subject is very interesting, but today we have already covered the time. This is the notion of Karta. From this, we will again start in the next class. We will take the time. We'll find very interesting. Even with the help of the modern neurology, it can be found, it can be proven, it can be ascertained that I am neither the doer nor I am the enjoyer, neither the Karta nor I am the Bhokta. Then where comes the question of my individuality? The individuality stands on these two things. And there's a big question. And then the scripture also comes to assert the fact that the sense of individuality is viparya, is illusion, which is resulting in all sides of klesha. That's why all the vrittis are klishta. But I can resort to another illusion, a particular type of illusion. I can myself design to another type of illusion to get rid of all the delusions. And that delusion by which I can get rid of all the delusions will be the aklishta viparya. So I think you're already finding this subject could be quite interesting. This notion that we are not the Karta, we will continue in the next class. It will take us another half an hour most probably. Before we go to the nature of Vikalpa, we will complete this the notion of Karta as something erroneous in the next class, and how we can, with the help of another erroneous idea, which can be an aklishta vritti, we can get rid of all the wrong notions. How we can get, that's a spiritual practice. That the spiritual practice also is in the domain of ignorance, but it can take us beyond ignorance. So that we will take up again in the next class. So with this, we stop our discussion today. If you have any questions, we can just...
Swamiji,
yeah.
This is Srinivasan.
Yeah.
I find this idea of having PowerPoint slides is absolutely brilliant. I understood this much better with this idea. Thank you for doing this.
Because it is so analytical, I thought that this will help. Otherwise,
absolutely, absolutely. But only one request, if it is not too inconvenient, for the classes we have already covered, would it be too difficult to prepare very brief charts so that we can have a continuous, like a book, we can have this, so that we can go back and refer to some points which were not clear to us.
Okay,
it
so that's a
appeared
good
to be
idea.
clear at the time you spoke to us.
Yeah,
but
I will prepare some slides and have a quick recapitulation of those sutras.
Yes.
Not next week we are going to have Buddha Purnima.
No. Whenever possible.
Yeah. After that, whenever we have the Yoga Sutra class next.
For all the previous chapters which we have covered. Actually, only one chapter, but the 1.5 from 1.1 to 1.5.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Thank you for the suggestion. We will.
Thank you very much. It was very nice today. I'm feeling much more clear. I think that is because also I am now used to listening to this not easy subject. I know
it's
this.
Not easy. Yeah, it will be very analytical. But once you get the joy out of it, it can be
Yes,
really very interesting.
exactly.
Very interesting.
Once you get the into the vibrations synchronized, then it all falls into place.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much, Swamiji.
Thank you, Srinivas. So, shall I end the class today?
Swamiji, Suresh here.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Swamiji?
Hello.
Please.
Swamiji, this is Vandana. I have just one very brief request.
Please.
You know how you said that memories are always good and they remain in the mind because that's how Prakriti, nature motivates us in future to sustain.
Yeah.
And bad experiences are filtered off, or I can say we try to forget. Otherwise, we won't be motivated.
Yeah.
I understood the concept, but can you please a little bit elaborate it, a little bit more? I just want a little bit. Because sometimes bad memories are still in the mind. You don't completely get rid of them.
Yeah, but whenever the bad memories are of course there, but whether it is bad memory or good memory, actually they are that the bad memory, we totally don't forget. The last point you will remember that when we have some anticipation and it is not fulfilled, we have a depression. Okay, but when we are in pursuit, whenever you will find in our life, whenever we are in pursuit, we are about to reach certain goal, we always think only the flowery side of it. And that motivates us to do it. It's much later, after we experience the adverse side of it, then we experience the suffering. But generally, when we are motivated to do something, that all the negative things never comes to our mind. It's a very, very general, you would say, our experience in life. Would you agree that?
Yes, Swamiji. Makes sense.
That's the thing which actually the nature is befooling us. Actually, if the memory is for everything, why not the memory of all the adverse things which you have gone through comes at the time when we are in the pursuit of certain things? They're also supposed to come, but it generally never comes. All the crimes, everything, after it has happened, then that person, if you just go and ask him, then he's repenting. Yes, I should have thought there's all those negative sides of it. In business, it happens that when you have a tremendous loss, then you thought, oh, I lost my foresight. That's so many things. I took it for granted. Everywhere you find that what happens, that when I am in pursuit, the nature has actually deluded me, clouded my intellect with all the negative things. Otherwise, I would be motivated. So that's the way we can understand that our pursuit for pleasure is something which is not going to give us enjoyment. And the best thing to understand is it all evaporates, not a single. The thing which you like, immediately it becomes a matter of your distaste when you overdo it. The first treat of the cheesecake you are having, you are enjoying it. You may go for the second, but by the time someone offers you the third, it becomes so disgusting. So what it proves that yes, the moment you reach satiation, after that you cannot continue with it. There is a margin, there's an end of it. And again, it will come back later. So this is the thing that is all this happiness in the life, you will find is a chase after the illusion. We think it is going to satisfy us. After I get this, there will be no need. But again, it comes back. So we came to enjoy the honey. Our wings got stuck in the honey, and now I cannot fly off. That's our condition. We, like a bee, we came like a fly. We came to enjoy the honey. We sip the honey. When we are sipping the honey, it's really very pleasurable. And now I want to fly off. I find I got stuck. So all these enjoyments are something like that. It is all sugar-coated quinine. The quinine is very bitter. That's why the tablet is sugar-coated. If the child, when you give the sugar-coated quinine to the child and just ask to swallow, it won't swallow because it likes the sweetness. And after some time, the bitter taste comes out. So that's what all the enjoyment is. The nature has coated with sugar, though actually at last it is going to give us a very bitter experience. It is just coated, and that's how it is deluding us so that it can use that happiness as a tool to make us do certain things, not to give us enjoyment. It is not I who am enjoying. It is used as a tool to befool us again and again. It's an illusion. It's a big illusion. Life after life, we are chasing that illusion. That's why Swami Vivekananda in one place very nicely told, There was one agnostic called Ingersoll. He was a very famous lecturer in the West. When he was lecturing all around, his idea was, if I have an orange, I will squeeze it till the last drop. I will enjoy the life with all my amenities. And Swamiji told, my goal is also the same. My goal is also the same. To enjoy the orange till the last drop. But the problem is, you don't have time. For you, only one life is there. I go on enjoying it leisurely because I know I live in eternity. You live in time, I live in eternity. So your goal is also to enjoy the orange. My goal is also to enjoy the orange. But because of lack of proper awareness of another dimension of existence, you can never do that. You are in a hurry, though you have that goal. So this is the idea that there is another level of existence where once you get established, these small enjoyments which is befooling me, that falls off. I get established in that happiness, which nothing can disturb me. And I get established in that eternity, which nothing can disturb me. So that's the idea which gradually the scripture is trying to just build up and make us saturated with that idea, so that that becomes our reflex. At present, our reflex is this body-mind complex. A hot body touches, even without my conscious decision, I remove the hand. A time will come when that I am not the body-mind complex, and the conscious principle will become my reflex. That's the sadhana. And then I can transcend all these illusions and get established in the real nature. That's the scripture. That as you go on studying, this is a quite vast subject. You will find these ideas will come again and again, again and again. You will find that gradually these ideas are getting more and more clear. We will go on discussing it. So I think to a certain extent, it is clear.
Yes, Swamiji, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You explained very well.
Swamiji, question about this Karta and Bhokta. Yes, similar concept has came in Gita as well. You know, Krishna talking about doing unattached or when we try to bring it into practice, like
yeah. So what? Yeah, in the Gita, that concept is totally different. Today's what happens after each and every class, let us try to focus. If we have a doubt in this idea, that let us try to question. Otherwise, what happens if that bring the idea of the detached action, which has been told in Gita, it will need few more classes. You know, just few words I cannot complete, just cannot discuss on it. But yes, at present, here also the idea of detachment is there. We will come to it. What's the idea of detachment? Gradually. If I am not the karta, then who is doing the action? In the next class, we will come. In the psychology, they speak of mental modules, over which they have fixed response. To give, as you have asked, let me just give an example. Suppose a lady is passing through the street. She hears the barking of a dog. Okay? She runs. Next day, she is along with a child. What to speak of the barking of a dog? Even if a lion just pounces, you will find the mother is facing the lion, guarding the child. She is ready to give away her life. The same mother who was fleeing from the barking of a dog, what gave that courage? You may feel that the mother has taken the decision. No. In the entire nature, you will find, what to speak of human being, even a deer, even any other animal, you will find to save the offspring, the mother is ready to give away her life. Why? Again, the working of the nature. How? When my life is in danger, I go to the protection mode. I have to self-protect myself. But when I have a child, now nature's work has already been done by you. Nature has already used you to have your child. Now the nature will be sustained by the child. So it has programmed each and every mother through the entire creation. What it has programmed? Now when the child has to be protected, you are ready, even you should become even ready to give away your life. The next day, because of the different situation, now your stimuli response is different. Previous day I was running away. Today I am facing, I am ready to give away the life. Now if I think I am the doer, then the expectation comes. When the child grows, I say, see, I have saved your life. You should do something for me. But if I knew God through Prakriti has devised me in such a way to protect his creation. He has used me as an instrument through the nature. I am just the instrument. I am just a nimitta. God has given that compassion in me to protect his creation. I am just the nimitta. Now the detachment comes. That these mental modules, as per the situations of life, gets activated. I am not the doer. As per the situation, the response is already fixed. The mental module, the next day child protection module has evolved as per the situation. Previous day self-protection modules have evolved. Today, the next day when the situation changes, the child protection module has evolved. That as per the situation, it is already programmed. I am not the doer. This thing will come to the next class when discussion will come. So that's why I'm saying that let us stop it here, and then you will find the question of detachment. That all the responsibilities of life, neither seek nor avoid. That I go through the responsibilities and it happens as per the situation. I do it with a total detachment. And that will lead us to the spiritual evolution. So we will come to that again in the next class. So
thank you so much.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Hari Om, Swami.
Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Swamiji.
Hari Om.